Hello, my name is Ozzy Rodriguez, and this is my e-portfolio. Of course, the homepage has my autobiographical narrative, saying my name, my background, associate's degree in game design and development from Isabel Community Colleges, bachelor's of Science and Applied Science from USF, along with my work experience in lawn care, a hotel, and at Goodwill, along with the courses I've taken, the skills that I've gained, along with my personal interests and professional abilities. I really like multimedia coding and gaming, and I have a little bit of knack of 3D modeling, but in the future when I might end up in the tech field of multimedia or coding or hopefully the gaming industry. Of course, this is my introduction, explain the five ACTs, which I will be elaborating on later. My overall goals, my e-portfolio, and let's go. Okay. Standard one, pretty much the first artifact I selected was from spring of 2026. EME 6613, Development of Technology-Based Education. For that, we actually had to make a game. This is actually what it is. This is the video you can click on and watch. And pretty much we had to use our combined knowledge because this was the final project. We had to create an interactive lesson. I did mine using I think it was Storyline and essentially created an interactive game where you had to do operators and math. I embodied the standard ACT standard 101 and pretty much creating because I had to create all this from scratch. It worked really well actually. And finding these assets actually worked out pretty good too. Pretty much skills 4, assess relevant characteristics of the setting because I had to make sure everything was working correctly and everything would work rather well. Add buttons, interactivity, had to do all that. This is a paper pretty much that I wrote based off of the game that I had to do too. The second artifact was from summer of 2023, AME 6356-bit data learning analytics. This one, pretty much we had to comb over a bunch of data using the search engine of abstracting keywords and pretty much to create our topic, which pretty much was increasing achievement level by increasing the grade level. It was my topic, and actually turns out it does. It just increases it ever so slightly, and pretty much we had to comb over a lot of material in order to come to our desired theory, which in the end I selected that one. 1.2 was the ACT embodied for the artifact using. Pretty much I had to draw a connection from with everything and pretty much to the source and find material that pretty much highlighted my topic, and actually I did. Number 5, perform the job, task, or content analysis because I actually had to comb over a lot of data in order to back up this theory. And yeah, I'm surprised it was actually warranted. Artifact 3, ME 6347, Digital Media and Learning from Fall 2025. This paper broke down all the material we covered from the beginning of the semester. Yeah, pretty much. It was pretty much my take from the course material of the class, which pretty much up to this point was the last paper, and we had to talk about everything and pretty much school systems and how they try to implement stuff over the decades and if how they worked and if they didn't work and all that. And pretty much had to comb over a lot of data to even see if like the average if it did work, and pretty much it really depended. 1.3 assessing and evaluating best describes this artifact because pretty much learned all kind of methods and pretty much has to test and refine the materials over the decades, and pretty much we had to assess all this information to see if it was pretty much valuable. And yeah, the skill that I got from all this was number 5 embodied this artifact because I had to perform a content analysis on this material, with pretty much covering everything that we read up to that point, and pretty much back up the material and of the school systems and what worked and what didn't work. We had to analyze everything, and yeah. Onto the second standard was for the first artifact. I chose EME 6613, Development in Technology-Based Education from spring 2026. This one was a presentation we had to do on a project of our choice. I chose history of video games was the topic I wanted to talk about because I'm actually very well uh, versed in video game history and stuff like that. So pretty much had to talk about its beginnings and how it evolved. We pretty much had to talk about a topic of our choice and elaborate on it. 2.2 was the ACT for this one, using since at the point I had to utilize the software we were taught. Yeah, because at this point I was using Storyline in order to create the presentation. I thought about doing PowerPoint, but ended up using this one. Had to use it. I had to the skill I learned was performing the job and the task and the content analysis because again had to comb over this information to pretty much elaborate on everything. And at the very end, the person who used it essentially was tested on the knowledge that I was explaining to them. The second artifact was from summer 2025 EME 6208 Interactive Media in the form of interactive presentation, how to write a program in code. And actually, this one was actually a pretty good presentation. It even quizzes you on the end, just like the last presentation. I found a lot more images with this one, and I did computer programming because, yeah, that was a topic I really liked talking about, and I was actually good at the time. And pretty much we covered its subjects and elaborated on and quizzed on the programming. Assembling it was rather easy. 2.3, assessing and evaluating is probably the best connection due to the fact this presentation does grade the user at the end of the presentation, evaluating on what they learned from it. I learned the skill, so it's number 7, selecting instructional materials, since I had to find various imagery and sources and questions to test the person on at the end, along with brushing up my multimedia skills. Artifact number 3 is 2025 EME 6209 digital video. We had to create an instructional lesson of our choice. I actually used one of my previous assignments to do that while using Adobe Express to compile the video while explaining how to use various features of Adobe Express. We essentially had to explain a software of our choice. I chose Adobe Express because at the time I was learning how to use Adobe Express, and it turned out rather well. 2.1, creating is what best connects to this one, since this was a learning lesson that essentially I had to elaborate on, and I was creating a lesson for people to know. I learned the skill number 10, develop training material, as I had to give a lesson on how to operate the program, and I think I did a pretty good job explaining to people how it worked. Standard number 3, of course, goes on to EME 6209, digital video, spring 2025, first artifact. Was the video that was actually from the standard 2 that I just talked about. Actually, this was the actual final product, and pretty much we had to use a poem and imagery and related to the poem in order to create this lovely video based off of a poem of our choice. I used the artifact, and this artifact is related to 3.1, as we had to create a utilized program of choice and structure choice, which in the end, Adobe Express explained how to use. I learned the skill assess relevant characteristics of the target audience, because this video it did have to connect to a target audience that would actually relate to the poem. It took me a while to actually find a poem that would even work. Artifact 2, EME 6207 web design for spring 2025. This was the culmination of essentially web development. We had to create a website that would work. Mine was inspired by USF. I had to learn how to use Adobe Dreamweaver, HTML code, among other things, along with finding assets and visuals that people would be able to use and recognize. The USF website's better than my website, of course. 3.4 was the ACT that connects, which was managing. It's actually the closest to the artifact because I had to update the code, make sure it worked and everything. And skill number 4, assess the relevant characteristics of the setting, because I really had to make sure everything worked with this. I mean, as you can see right now, this technically was not the final product. This was just a jumbled result of trying to upload it to the ePortfolio. For some reason, it would not upload properties, so this was the closest I could get. Artifact number 3, ME6208, Interactive Media. This one was essentially a creation of another website. This was not the same website, but this was very similar. This was a culmination of assignments that we had to learn, and essentially had to use HTML code in order to freaking utilize. And actually, it actually turned out rather well. It actually turned out better because this was uploaded to an actual site that I was able to use the link and upload to this. So it actually turned out better. This one embodies 3.2, essentially a combination of resources using and planning and strategies we had to learn to create a site. And actually, I wish I knew this, because the one I just talked about would have came out a lot better. Number 5, perform job task or content analysis. Pretty much, I had to perform the job. I had to perform a task. I had to create a website. I essentially had to upload a lot of stuff that I used and create a relation to it that connected to the material. And actually, it turned out rather well, if very simple. Standard number 4. Artifact number 1, EME 6356 back data and learning analytics for summer 2023. This was a presentation we had to create, and pretty much I created mine on AI in the education field. Essentially, I had to explain the pros, cons, and benefits of AI and see where I thought it was going, and even if it was going to help in the field. I used PowerPoint to actually create this presentation. It actually came out rather well too. I like the images I utilized looking back on it. 4.3, reflection on practice, because in the end I had to reflect on everything that I did at the time and years later. And actually, it turned out pretty good. I could have fleshed out more deep information to explain better to the user or whoever looked at the presentation. The skill I learned was number 5, perform job or task, because again, I was performing a job or task, I had to analyze content in order to make sure I came up with relevant material that the person would come across and would learn in the end. They were not tested on this. Artifact number two, EDF 6284 problems and instructional design for computer fall 2025. This is actually an entire list of group chats from Discord because essentially we had the entire class was like nothing but discussions reviewing material on education and technology and its relation, where it worked, where it didn't work, and what could have been improved on. We essentially were given our 2 cents in multiple groups amongst the entire semester. And actually, we learned a lot from each other by the end, too, although it was a crash course because I didn't know Discord at the time. I wasn't an expert on it. This artifact represents 4.0 and 4.1 collaborative practice as we collab with nearly the whole class working on this discussion. And pretty much what we learned turned out rather well, too, because we actually brought in our own knowledge. Number four, assess the relevant characteristics of the setting. Since our discussions were done through Discord, we had a little crash course at times, and pretty much had to assess relevant information, even if we were talking about was relevant even at the time. Artifact 3 and E6356, Big Data and Learning Analytics from summer 2023. This was a reflection that we had to do about everything we had learned up to this point on big data, privacy, information. And needless to say, we learned a lot about big data, but some of the big data we learned can yeah, as we've seen in modern days, it could be broken, it could be bent, and pretty much the benefits of having security. The artifact represents 4.5 ethics because this is a highly ethical area, and pretty much you can mess with the ethics in this field, and you really don't want to mess with it. You gotta make sure everything is correct. Number one, perform a needs assessment and analysis. I had to comb over a lot of data to make sure I was talking relevantly about this material as I was writing this, because at times I was forgetting what I was talking about at times, and I would start rambling at times. But it turned okay in the end, I think. Standard number five, Artifact 1, EME 6055 Current Trends in Instructional Technology Spring 2025. This was a roundtable report. We actually passed this around and commented on. We essentially had to create a report, and then I think at one point we were supposed to put questions at the end of it that each of us were supposed to talk about. And pretty much we passed this around and just commented on our stuff and evolved our knowledge over time. I mean, we had to build up our knowledge. It actually turned out pretty good too, I think. Mine was on chapter 27, e-learning instructional design, of course, and I elaborated on that. 5.1 theoretical foundations, since I had to refer to the field based on what it was like and how it evolved over the years. E-learning in a short amount of time has come a long way. Instructional design has probably evolved into great learning lessons for people. Only time will tell if it gets any better or if it gets worse. Who knows? Number four, assess the relevant characteristics of the setting. I essentially had to analyze the possible audience and the material in the process. And actually, the material is actually pretty good for the topic, and it gets fleshed out over the chapters. Artifact 2, ME6009 Digital Video Spring 2025. This was a storyboard that was put together into a legible video using Adobe Express. This one was on Goodwill. This was very simple. As I used Adobe, I had to find pictures and videos and stuff and assemble it. It turned out rather well. 5.4 ethics, since I had a lot of topics that could be used, but this needed to be researched because Goodwill is all about being the best for the people. And and when it comes to ethics, it turned out well. Number one, perform a needs assessment, because when you create a video like this, you start to wonder, like, why did I make this? And actually, I found out pretty much this video needed to be made. EME 6055 Current Trends Instructional Tech Spring 2025 Artifact number 3. This was the culmination of picking a job and looking into it. And this one was instructional designer job analysis report that I did. I essentially had to look up and essentially the work of instructional designers and looked up their skills, pros, cons, and benefits, and literally everything. That needs to say this was 5.3, assessing and evaluating, since I had to look up so much data and I found a lot of pros and cons about it, and also a lot of requirements too. Number five, perform job or task or content analysis, since I had to comb through a lot of data, man. There was so much data I had to look forward to when it came to this. And now onto the reflection page of what I've learned making this portfolio. Number one, I did not save enough assignments. I need to save more assignments. But reflecting on it, I've come a long way versus when I was in getting my associate's degree. It turned out rather well. Would I have approached the artifacts differently? Probably not, but I would have fleshed out more data. And my perspective on technology really hasn't changed at all, because pretty much I know technology could come a long way, but it can also hinder our own mental development. And yeah, I hope that doesn't become a thing, and I hope we continue to evolve technology without being dependent on it. but go hand in hand with it. This ePortfolio was very enlightening. The YouTube video goes here.